In our last video, we broke down the Leaving Cert's composition papers and talked about what they entail depending on whether you're doing ordinary or higher level. In this video, I want to do the exact same thing for the performance exam, just go through what it will entail depending on whether you're doing ordinary or higher level and all the other things you need to know about the Leaving Cert performance exam in music. The performance exam happens a little bit earlier than the rest of the Leaving Cert. It takes place in March or April each year. And just like the composition paper, it's worth 25%. If you're doing ordinary level, you might have an extra 25% that you choose to give to performance. That'll make it worth 50%. If you're doing higher level, you might opt to do your elective in performance, which will make that worth 50%. So I'm just going to quickly break down the performance exam and talk about what it'll involve in each of them. The main differences between the ordinary and higher level exam performance, I'm just going to write them down. So I'm going to write ordinary level here. I'm going to write higher level just down here. The main differences are both in the differentiation between them. So when you do your prepared and unprepared sections, the ordinary level ones will be slightly easier than the higher level. But the other main differences is in what you have to do as part of your prepared part of your exam. In the ordinary level exam, you have to play 2 songs or pieces plus an unprepared section. So you have to do 2 songs if you're a singer, or pieces if you're an instrumentalist, plus an unprepared part, which we will talk about in greater detail in a while. If you're doing higher level, you have to do 3 songs or pieces, plus an unprepared section. Or an alternative, if you're doing higher level, is you can do 2 songs / pieces on one instrument. 2 songs / pieces on one instrument. Call this 1. 2 songs / pieces on another instrument. On instrument 2. And again, your unprepared part of your exam. If you choose this option, the 2 songs or pieces on one instrument and 2 on another, the pieces you're playing only have to be of an ordinary level standard. So for example, if you play 2 instruments to an ordinary level standard, you might take this option. If you play 1 instrument but to a standard of much higher than ordinary level, you might choose to take this option where you do 3 songs pieces on 1 instrument and you're unprepared. That's the main difference between the ordinary level and higher level exams. Other than that, I want to quickly talk about the actual exams themselves and what they involve. What do you have to do with them? Well, essentially, there are 2 sections to your exam. I kind of touched on these briefly earlier on. Regardless of whether you're doing ordinary or higher level, you have to do both a prepared section to your exam and an unprepared part. Okay. Your prepared part I suppose it's the main part of your exam. It's the pieces that you've learned, that you've been practicing all along on your instrument or with voice or whatever else. And you have a couple of different options for that. You can either sing or play as as an individual. So I'm going to say play / sing solo. And if you're doing this, there are very few restrictions on what you can do. You can play or sing a piece from any genre of music you want. There are no real main restrictions on this. The only thing you have to be aware of is that it should be of a standard, so a standard congruent with somebody who has studied music for junior cert level and done an extra 2 years after that. So standard of junior cert, JC, plus 2 years, and that's the only real restriction on someone who's choosing to play or sing solo. Another option then is to play or sing as part of a group. So I'm just going to write that here. Play or sing as part of a group. If you're playing or singing as part of a group, you also have to be of a standard of junior cert plus 2 years. But there are several other restrictions that you need to keep in mind. The piece of music you play or sing has to have at least 2 parts. So for example, if you're a guitar player with a band, you're going to want to have a bass part that is different to your own part, or a vocal part that's different to the guitar part. You have to have at least two parts of music in that song. If you're a classical musician, you're going to want to have another instrumentalist playing a part that's different to your part. You can't have everyone essentially playing in unison. They do allow this. They do allow you to play with everyone playing in unison if it's a particularly difficult unison line, but essentially you want to have at least two parts of music. And the other main restriction, if you're playing or singing as part of a group, is that you personally are playing a significant part. So, a significant part. Oops, my mistake. So you're playing a significant part. So, for example, you can't just have an instrument that sits quietly in the background and that if you were to take it out of music, people wouldn't even really notice. It has to be something that plays an important part in the music that you're playing. A third option for you, if you're doing your prepared section of your exam, is what we're going to call the music technology option. So music tech. This essentially involves using a software notation program like Sibelius or Finale or MuseScore. For this, if you're doing the music tech option, you have to do a couple of things. You have to input your music into a program like Sibelius or Finale, a software notation program. So you input it via an electronic instrument like a MIDI keyboard. After you've inputted it, you have to save it, so file, save as, etc. You then have to retrieve it, so you have to retrieve your music, as in you have to load it up again. You then have to edit your music in some way. So when you edit it, you're going to have to do something like change the pitches, some of the pitches of the notes. You could change the rhythm, you could change some of the dynamics, anything, as long as you're in some way editing the score. And you also have to produce a printed and or taped version of your score. So a MIDI recording or a printed score. That's the music tech option. If you're doing the music tech option and you're a higher level student, you're going to have to do a little something extra. As well as inputting via Sibelius or Finale or something else, you have to do one of two things. You can either play along with a recording of yourself, so essentially play along with a backing tape of yourself, or you can do two pieces. You have to play two pieces from a standard repertoire on electronic instruments of electronic instruments. So two pieces of electro, right? So for example, if you're doing the music tech option, you'll have to take two famous pieces of electronic music, play them. That's if you're an electronic musician as opposed to a traditional musician. Okay, that's the music tech option. Another potential option for someone for the prepared section of their exam is to conduct or rehearse an ensemble. Conduct and rehearse an ensemble. So this is for somebody who, rather than play an instrument themselves, they want to go in and conduct another group of musicians to play for their exam. They suggest, if you're doing this, that you have at least 1 year's experience conducting ensembles. They don't want you to just go in and do this kind of off the cuff. This is something you should have a lot of practice doing, and you should know the musicians that you're working with. Essentially, you have to do two things as part of your conducting and rehearsing prepared exam. You have to do a rehearsed score, so one that you've prepared in advance, that you've worked on with a group of musicians, and you've rehearsed it, and they come in and they perform that, and you conduct them. And you also have to do an unseen score. So I'm going to write unseen score. And what this essentially is you'll be given a little bit of time, you'll be given a score that you've never seen before, a little bit of time, and you'll be brought back in and you'll be asked some questions about that. You'll be asked about some of the musical features, some of the technical demands of conducting or rehearsing this piece of music, and you'll be expected to know certain things. When you have your time to look at it, you're going to want to look at things like are there any particular sections that you need to take note of where instruments are being brought in or instruments are dropping out, or anything that you'll really need to be able to point out to musicians when you're rehearsing that. That's the main thing for the conducting and rehearsing part of the prepared exam. You'll be expected to know quite a bit about the techniques of conducting. You'll have to talk about those during the unseen score part. So I would suggest you don't go for this unless you have at least a year's experience doing this. Another option then for your prepared exam is improvisation. The improvisation part of the exam, you can take one of many different approaches. You can do a melodic improvisation, you can do a rhythmic one. So for example, if you're a drummer and you want to do a drum solo, an improvised drum solo, you can do a harmonic improvisation, so a sequence of chords. You can do a free improvisation where you make it up without any musical stimulus, or you can do any combination of these. So it could start off as a rhythmic improvisation, it becomes more melodic, derived from some musical stimulus, and then it becomes a free improvisation. So those are essentially the different options that you have for the prepared section of your performance exam. There's also a section on the syllabus that just lists as other, anything else that doesn't fall under any of these categories. If you want to do that, you have to clear it up on an individual basis with the Department of Education. You have to talk to them about it beforehand. So that's just anything that doesn't fall under here. But to be honest, I can't really imagine too much that doesn't fall under one of these headings. Okay, the other main part of your performance, of the performance part of your exams, is the unprepared section. The unprepared section is, as the name suggests, it's unprepared. It's something that you haven't been able to look at beforehand in the months leading up to it. It's not a piece you've learned, it's something completely you've never looked at before. And depending on what type of musician you are, there are several different approaches you can take to this. You can do a sight reading exam. So if you're an instrumentalist and you're particularly good at sight reading, you could choose that for your unprepared test. You can do sight singing. So if you're a singer, you can be given a piece of music that you have to sight sing. You can do what's called an oral memory test. I'll explain that in more detail in a few minutes. Or you can do improvisation, like the one we talked about above. And essentially, regardless of whether you're doing higher or ordinary level, these are going to be 8 bars long. So you're going to have to do 8 bars of sight reading, 8 bars of oral memory, 8 bars of sight singing, whatever else. And these are really appropriate to your instrument. So the sight reading exam, if you're a pianist, it's going to have 2 parts. It's going to have a bass clef and it's going to have a treble clef part. If you're a violinist, it will have bowing marks, phrasing marks, things like that. So it would be appropriate to instrument. And it will also usually have some dynamic effects. So it'll have crescendos or decrescendos, and it will have some dynamics. And these are things that you need to be kind of aware of, as well as the actual notes you're playing. Sight singing then is basically the singing equivalent of that, so you have to sight sing your notes. Oral memory it's essentially a clapping test, and this is probably the easiest of all the unprepared options, and for that reason most people will usually tend to do the clapping test. This is essentially that you're played a melody that's going to be 8 bars long, and you then have to clap back the rhythm of that melody. You're given a couple of seconds to kind of think about it, think through in your head, and then you clap back the rhythm of that melody. Like I said, it's the easiest option, and for that reason it's probably the one most commonly done by people. Improvisation then, if you do improvisation as your unprepared question, it's essentially the same as the improvisation in the prepared one. So you can do, if we scroll back up here, you can do melodic improvisation, rhythmic, harmonic, free, or any combination of those. That's the improvisation section, and you can do it as part of your the unprepared part of your exam. I hope this helps, and in the next video we're going to have a look at the listening exam.